Hello, hello. It is Justin Colletti of Sonic Scoop. Thanks for joining me for this week's episode of the Sonic Scoop podcast. And today we are talking about stereo width. We all want it. We all want wider mixes that still have cohesive solid center. How do we get it? That's the question. And we're going to be looking today at some techniques that are totally free near the end of this episode, because I want to give you some ideas of just how you can do width with just good mixing practices. But we're also going to geek out about a lot of tools, and not just the obvious usual suspects of stereo widening tools. We're going to be talking about weird, lesser known, uncommon, and super interesting stereo widening tools. And to do that, I am not alone. I have a guest, one Mr. Nick Messitte. He's back by popular demand. The last time I had Nick Messitte on talking about the best plugins of 2025, the people in the comments said, we need more Nick, and Justin talk less so he can talk more, and just don't stop him and let him go. So Nick is our resident plugin geek, super geek. He knows all of the plugins. He's tried all of the plugins. I want you to try Stump Nick in the comments. If you're here for the live premiere in the chat, type in your comments, and whatever plugin you name, I bet you he's tried it. At least he has tried something like the dozen or so plugins that are in the article he just wrote for our site. You got to check it out. It's called The Best Stereo Width Plugins that you probably haven't heard of. It just came out today by Nick Messitte. He's got 30 audio examples in there. There's got to be at least a dozen plugins in here. And we're going to give you a sense for the usual suspects, why each of them are cool. And we're going to go into super weird ones. All right. With my yammering out of the way, Nick Messitte, how are you doing? Thank you for joining us all the way from New York.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I think your listeners also said that they needed better audio from me, so hopefully this is we got the studio up and running, and also that I looked punched in the face, which that's just how it looks when you're in Nick City.
Yeah, it is. Last time, I think Nick was just on like a laptop. I think he was actually talking to us through a potato last time. Now he only has a camera for a potato, or a potato for a camera. But today, it's so interesting that a guy like this with all this super sexy analog hardware over his left shoulder would be talking us through a laptop microphone. But today, I think he has like a basic USB microphone plugged in. So we've come up in the world. And he also put on a shirt for us. I think he got out of his bathrobe for this. Is that true? I don't know.
Yes,
all right, Nick. Let me put my headphones on because we're going to be able to listen to some audio examples today as we go through some of these tools. So, Nick, thank you so much for doing this article. You guys should definitely check it out on the website. Nick put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this, and there are so many audio examples you can check out. But before we do that, yeah, I'm sure there was a lot of crying while you did this. Hopefully there'll be less crying on the live stream.
Yeah.
But here's the big question. You kind of skip over the idea of some of the usual suspects. The most common stereo width tools out there are probably Ozone's Imager, Wave's S1, the FabFilter Pro Q, maybe if you use it in mid-side mode, and then pretty much every plugin line's Brainworks plugin has a stereo width control on them. Before we go into some of your esoteric choices, what do you like about each of these really usual suspects? What do you think they do well, and what do you think they miss when it comes to things like the Isotope Imager and the Waves Imager?
Okay. Well, I should start out by saying I like all three of those plugins on the actual, like in an element, on an element, not across the mix bus. I don't really use any of those on the mix bus except maybe the Ozone Imagers sometimes. But I have things I like about all three of them. They all sort of work off of a similar principle, which in their most basic, let's not mess with the under the hood settings. They all sort of do a variation of the same thing, which is just manipulating your side signal. So, and I think I demonstrated that by nulling two of them together pretty early on in the article. What did I null? I nulled the master version of the Brainworks versus the Ozone Imager, just broadband nulling them. And they null.
Interesting. So you used the Ozone Imager in just completely broadband mode. So you did 33% enhancement here. You had similar settings on the Brainworks. So if you just turn up the main width control on one band on Ozone and do the same thing on Brainworks, they're basically doing the same thing. Can you give us a sense for how they're manipulating the side signal? Is it like splitting it into a mid-side matrix and just turning up the side signal relative to the mid? Is that what's happening with these tools?
That's exactly it, Justin. Really no more than that. The one thing to note is that does create quite a difference when you're working with plugins that aren't operating on linear phase. So I think you should note that I nulled the master version of the Brainworks versus the Imager. If you chose the mix version or any of the Brainworks plugins that are in, or the wideners that are in the usual lineup of Brainworks and Plugin Alliance plugins, they're not going to null because there's going to be that stereo. There's going to be an entire shift of entire phase rotation on the difference channel on the side signal, which can be cool. Like, definitely has a mojo about it, but it helps to know what it is. That makes it sort of similar in that respect to using the FabFilter Pro Q3 in mid-side mode in a minimum phase mode.
Yeah. Very interesting. Now, another quick question here is these additional controls. Now, Nick, in addition to being a great mixing engineer and audio engineer, is also a great communicator. You've written a bunch for the Isotope website, doing blog articles for them. So you're probably the guy to ask a few more questions about this. On the Ozone Imager, first of all, they do have a free version, which is like single band. So if you guys haven't used it, just go get the free version of the Ozone right now. And also, there's a whole bunch of free Brainworks plugins, some of which allow you to mess around with this stereo width. But one thing that a lot of people might not understand how it works or what it's trying to do are these controls over the center section of the Ozone, where there is this stereoize function, and then there's a knob that says number of milliseconds, and then there's this recover sides option. This was added, I think, a few versions ago in Ozone, these additional controls. Can you give people a sense of what these kinds of things are doing to your audio that's different from conventional stereo widening?
Yeah, so the top one, the stereoizer is implementing Haas delays in two different ways. One is a little bit more subtle than the other. I think mode 2 is more subtle than mode 1. And that is not... it's a very alluring effect, but it very quickly, if you sum it to mono with something like that, you're going to hear like a weird bounce back in your mix. Is the simplest way to put it. Which is why something like that I wouldn't use on the mix bus. Really, like if you have a problem where if you're getting a mix in mono and you shouldn't use this to make it stereo. I think that would be wrong. If there was some other issues, maybe you could introduce a Haas delay into like some part of the signal. I would think maybe the highs, definitely not the lows, so you need that. Could possibly do something, but that's what it's doing, is adding the delay. And then the recovering sides is every once in a while you get a mix as a mastering engineer, and you know this, it's too wide, and you got to bring it in. And what the recover sides function lets you do is it sort of mirrors, it sort of takes what's in the sides and sort of injects it subtly into the mids, and it does it in a multi-band approach, depending on how you have it dialed in. Anything that's basically in the negative values of those four sliders is going to get reflected into the sides, or into the mids from the sides. So if you're used to tools like Dr. MS from back in the day, that can do a similar thing. And then there's other tools like free and indie tools. Honestly, you could do it with just simple routing in your DAW if you wanted to. But it's good to have it in one knob.
Now, here's a question for you. Under stereoize, when you're talking about Haas delays, for people who aren't familiar with the term Haas, I believe that would be, is it H-A-A-S or is it H-A-S-S? H-A-A-S.
No, it's two A's. Two A's, one S.
Yes. Right, very true.
It always makes me want to eat ice cream.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah. Haas and Daz, the new flavor of ice cream that makes your ears grow wider. So the Haas delays, we're talking about delaying one side relative to the other by an amount under 40, 50 milliseconds, something like that, I'd imagine.
Yeah, something like that. And the I have to go back and look in the manual because the manuals come out and Isotope has very detailed manuals
Yeah.
buried. You got to sort of like find the right Amazon hosting link to get them. But there are they will tell, like, Mode 1 was the first one that was made, and I think at around version 7 they introduced
Hmm.
Mode 2, and Mode 2 is much more subtle. So I don't understand exactly how it
Right.
goes about putting it decides
My guess is
what's
that's
delay
not
where.
totally broadband. And there
Yeah,
must be some type of multi-band delaying, because if you just take your left side and delay your right side from it, you're going to get a really kind of weird comb filtery kind of thing
yeah,
that
yeah.
sounds way more exaggerated. So there must be some kind of multi-band series of delays. So I'd be interested to hear more about what's happening under the hood. But yes, it's usually too much to ever use on a stereo mix. However, if you have like a super mono instrument and you just want to give that instrument like width and wraparound and size, or maybe even take a kind of mono effect and stereoize it, I think the more you want something to be effecty, and the more it's either an individual track or an effect that you're widening, the more that stereoize comes in handy. Is that
Yeah,
your experience too?
yeah, and I think in the article, when you hear it, I put an acoustic guitar that is mono that I wished was double tracked through it, and it worked. It was one of, like you said, 73 plugins I tried for this specific purpose in this article,
Right?
uh, and that one I think was one of the better ones. So it's definitely one I would use in that scenario. If
Sweet.
you were to get like a mono mix and someone was like, make this stereo, it's the last thing I'd try,
Of course.
honestly.
Well, the last thing, probably along with two of the others that we're about to mention as some of the usual suspects, which would be the Sound Toys Microshift and the
Uh-huh.
Eventide H3000. And these are classic old school stereophizing effects. In fact, the guy who designed most of the presets in the H3000 is Ken Bogdanowicz, who's the founder of Sound Toys. And Microshift is basically a Sound Toys recreation of some of the types of sounds that were in there. And honestly, a huge part of why the H3000 was so successful were so many of the presets that Ken Bogdanowicz created for the original H3000. And he was like, hey, I'm a big part of like why this H3000 had been so successful. Like maybe we could partner more, and maybe, there could be some type of revenue sharing arrangement. And I think Aventide basically told him to kick rocks. So he was like, well, I'm going to start my own company then. And then he did. That's at least
Spite is a
my,
useful motivator, I find. Yeah.
I don't know if it was quite spite as much as being able to grow elsewhere. Of course, I'm dramatizing the story. Those guys get along perfectly fine, and they're all wonderful folks. I've interviewed the guys from Eventide and from Sound Toys, but they have that shared history, and I'm making it sound more dramatic than it really is for fun. But there's a reason that both of these sets of tools are so common for widening things. So let me bring these up. Can you tell us a little bit about what something like the Microshift and something like the H3000 are doing to get stereo widening for individual instruments?
You probably know more than I do when it comes to the pedigree of what exactly what the Eventide is doing. But the Microshift is the one that I use more of the time, and it's just a classic doubling effect at this point.
Mm-hmm.
It is the sound of an 80s vocal double. You just hear it and you're like, oh yeah, that's friggin' Sting or what's that? Those people who made those songs that were always really popular in the mall. Debbie Gibson. Yeah, it'll sound like
Sure.
that's what those. There were a raft of artists around then who couldn't. And I'm not going to say Debbie Gibson's one of them. But there were some of them who could not sing, and this was a trick used on these singers to just sort of you put them in the middle, and you put like someone a little bit flat on the left and someone a little bit sharp on the right, which is which is part of what it's doing with the detuning. You delay it and you pitch shift it, and it fools your ears into thinking it's more in tune than you think.
Yes, but these things
Um,
were also used not just as the we don't have auto tune yet for bad pop singers, but also, I mean, there's so many classic like electric guitar sounds that were done through these
yep.
kinds of things. Like it was a a lead electric guitar, like widen your electric guitar
Oh
in
my
that era,
God.
and you still hear it constantly
That
today.
jazz guitar sound from like Mike Stern and every single jazz guitar player, John Scofield, Mike Stern, Pat Metheny, they have that sound in the 80s. And it's like,
Oh, totally.
it's so obvious. You're like, oh,
Yes,
yep,
but
that's that.
then there's also like the rock and metal version of that too. Like there's a certain type of
Yes.
metal or rock guitar solo that has this sound on it. And
Yep.
things like this can be really fun and they can sound extremely retro and dated or extremely like interesting and contemporary if you just mess with them a little bit more, going into some of the tweak capabilities that things like the microshift and the more modern H3000 with the expanded controls allows you to kind of mess around with things. But so those are basically the old school stuff. We only touch very briefly on the idea of the S1 stereo imager, but I'm going to guess that's the same type of widening that's happening in the Brainworks plugins with their stereo width control and the Ozone imager we're turning up the sides. The Ozone imager has some of those extra controls where we can stereoize things that aren't stereo at all. It has the recover sides function, and it has probably my favorite thing about the Ozone imager is that it has the ability to work in a multi-band kind of way.
Yeah.
And the fact that you can, like, if you look at the Brainworks one, it basically will allow you to center your lows and widen everything above it, which is a really common thing in mastering back in the day. There would be things called elliptical filters that would let you center lows so they wouldn't pop, a needle out of the groove, and then you could widen things above it. There's a control just like that on the Massilesque mastering desk that I learned mastering on over at Joe Lambert Mastering. But the thing that I love about the Ozone one is that there's 4 bands, and you could, if you wanted to, instead of centering the lows all the way, you could center the lows just a little bit. Or
Yep.
what's actually becoming more common today, widening the lows a little bit.
Yeah.
This is something they told me not to do, but everyone's doing it these days. The kids are
Everyone's
doing it. They love wide lows.
I remember about 3 or 4 years ago, a producer named Jamie Silverstein was telling me everyone on drum, like this is what everyone's doing in LA right now. They're
Yep.
taking their drum bus and they're widening the lows. And I
Yeah.
was like, no. And he's like, just wait, it's going to be
Yes.
huge. And
Oh,
it
I
is.
started to notice it on references that people gave me. I'm like,
Yeah.
because there was this classic, alternative rock kind of thing with, tighter lows, where there'd be more mono. And I started hearing it, within the past probably 10 years, increasingly popular. Was like, wow, are they widening the lows? So in many of my masters these days, I'm widening the lows a little bit.
Yep.
For those people who like they give me references where the low end for all the references is wide, but theirs isn't, I'll use that multiband approach where maybe I'm only widening the lows, between 5 and 15%, and then possibly I'm widening the mids and the highs more than that. But yeah, that's something that Isotope Ozone allows you to do that I don't think S1 Imager allows you to do, and
No.
that the Brainworks stuff only does the opposite of that. It doesn't have the widening effect.
Pro Q, FabFilter Pro Q will let you do it.
So that's the other question. You put in here Pro Q 4, which is, most people will know it as an EQ plugin. Tell me, how is Pro Q 4 an EQ plugin, a stereo width plugin in your book?
Well, because it's manipulating the mid and side channels, the sum and difference. I mean, this is, there was a time when I started writing for Isotope back in the day, nobody knew about mid-side EQs. Everybody knows about mid-side EQs now. And part of the reason is because FabFilter was the first, I think, or at least the first mainstream EQ that would let you, and I remember it was the big jump between 1 and 2, that you could in one instance go left, right, mid, or sides on any band. And once you give that to someone, they're going to play with it. And it's pretty clear at that point that you start playing with it, you start seeing, oh yeah, I'm widening this, I'm narrowing that, I'm using dynamic width so that it's like the side, like with Pro Q3, you can like make the sides pump with the kick drum. Like there's there's things you can do that you couldn't do before. Pro Q 4, you could make the sides spectrally bounce if you wanted to. So like, I mean, I wouldn't advise it because it would be very weird, but maybe sometime that weirdness is appropriate. You want your resonances to like follow the kick a little bit, like the trail of a wedding gown or something. I can't think of why that would be necessary, but now we have wide, low end and drums, so who knows?
Yeah,
it might happen.
So let me clarify some of this. Just
Sorry
to make sure. No. I want to clarify in my own head, and for those people listening with us, the difference between this approach and the isotope ozone. With isotope ozone, if we use it with the 4 different bands, what's essentially happening is it's like a multi-band compressor, right? Where we have a crossover. So on our lowest band, it'll say widen the sides when I turn up this knob, but only do it to things below 150 hertz. So it's almost like a multi-band compressor where you have crossovers. Then we'll have a second band, and the second band might be, you can set it between, say, everything from 150 hertz to 500 hertz. Now I can widen or de-widen that band by turning up and down the sides relative to the center, and vice versa, turning up and down the center relative to the sides in kind of a level matched way. Right. What's different here, it seems like, is almost like the difference between a multi-band compressor and a dynamic EQ, right?
That's exactly right.
Where a multi-band compressor and a dynamic EQ are the same thing, but the multi-band compressor is giving you these buckets with crossovers, where the dynamic EQ is instead giving you an EQ interface to do multi-band compression. It sounds like what you're saying with the Fab filters, and now allows us to have an EQ or even dynamic EQ kind of interface instead of a multi-band compressor kind of interface that allows us to pick and choose exactly where we want to widen things. So I guess with the Fab filter, I would put it in the EQ in mid and side mode. And if I wanted it to sound wider, I would just EQ up the sides in a certain band. And that's going to have the effect of widening that band. Does that make sense? Is that what's happening here?
That's largely correct. There's a few things I want to add to it and say. One is that another difference between the two of them is that the imager of ozone is only in linear phase mode. So it's not going to be introducing that phase schmear that sometimes is great. The Pro Q4 has 2 different minimum phase modes and a whole bunch of different linear phase modes. All of them have a different sound to the stereo. All of them will change the sound of the stereo signal if you split.
And this is probably an application where you'd hear the difference the most between the different types of modes. Often, like if you're just EQing something in mono, there should practically be very little difference if it's just a completely mono signal with no other parallel signals to it. And you change between linear phase and regular phase, like it shouldn't make much of a difference. But when you're EQing one side differently than the other, or the sides differently from the center, that's where you should hear the differences more than
that's also part of like why on a Pro Q4, another thing you could do is not put it in linear phase mode and not use mid-side, use left-right independently. And if you take, like, say, you do 500 on a little bump at 500 on one and a little bump at 550 on the other, that's going to 3D you a little bit.
Yes.
And I actually like to do it higher up, left and right, a little bit different, like 14 kilohertz shelf on one side, 12 kilohertz shelf on the other side with the same cue. That's going to spread you out in a very interesting way because of the phase shift. More than anything else. It's tough to say in mono how much the phase affects the sound. I would guess that it probably more than if it did. Let me put it this way: if it didn't, I would have no reason to have these. You know what I mean? So if everything was just straight linear phase EQ, so it probably does do something.
And linear phase also, I should mention, has its own issues where you can get rid of some of the phase issue. However, you introduce this potential for pre-ringing. So there's only trade-offs in audio. There's no such thing as fixing all problems. It's like, which problems do you want to have more of? And that's kind of how everything in audio is, whether you're designing speakers or EQs and
I know,
or mixing.
So annoying.
Yeah.
It's so...
Why isn't there just a perfect button that makes it all perfect right now, Nick?
Yeah. I know. Well, I'm working on it. I'm working on it. But
all right. Well,
taste is making
the right trade-offs. And another interesting thing you've popped into my brain here is we've talked about one way of enhancing width with a stereo tool would be to turn up sides, but another way is to treat the two sides a little bit differently, which is what we looked at with the stereoize function in the isotope. Stereoize function is basically delaying two sides differently. That's pretty radical, but a subtle way of doing is exactly what you mentioned, EQing one side differently than the other. And you're not alone. Very famous producer named Daniel Lanois, one of his favorite things is whenever he would record a stereo source, like drum overheads, he would always use mismatched stereo mics. Because to him, he just felt like it made things sound a little bit wider. And he's not wrong. Whenever there's a little bit of a difference between left and right in EQ, that kind of pulls our ears out a little bit. And also, I would add, they've done some scientific studies that have shown that even if you have a different amount of noise between left and right, that gives people a sense of width. Like if there's a subtly different amount of noise, just white noise between left and right, and you just add in a little more white noise on one side than the other, people experience the whole sound as being wider. And also the same thing carries over to distortion. Like if there's more harmonic distortion on one side versus the other.
Speaking of that, that's like, I think I told you this off mic once, but like one of my favorite tricks to do on something like a pad is to use like the Pultec mid EQ, whatever it's called, but I'll use the UAD one on the left and I'll use the Waves one on the right. Same settings. And they're
just subtly different enough
especially like if you've got like a pad, or if you've got like really vibey, washy sort of shoegazy guitars, it rocks. It absolutely
beautiful.
Rocks.
All right. Well, we've spent so much time looking at the basic tools that your article isn't even about, that we just assume everyone knows. But I don't know. I think this is a pretty deep discussion of conventional stereo wideners. And now with that set, we can start to go through some of your picks for the crazy stereo wideners. And you have them broken down into a few categories here. Let me see if I recall. You broke them down to the category of things that are good on individual instruments, things that are good on subgroups, and things that are good on the stereo bus. So
and then
corrections. And then ones that are good for correction or corrective tools. So let's talk about all of these, and maybe we won't go into as much detail on some of these, but let's talk about what makes them unique. Your first pick here, first nomination for Best for Individual Tracks is Pan Pot 3 Good Hertz. Now, before we get into this, I got to do two quick things before we get into your top picks. One is to remind folks that this episode is totally free. And the reason it's totally free to the public is because we have sponsors. And the most important sponsor is always you. How do you sponsor this podcast? Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell so you get alerted to more of these. Leave a comment for us. It really does help spread the word and get more people to check this out. Another thing you can do, if you want to check out this article, it's linked down below. We have affiliate links for any of these plugins in there. So if you buy any plugins today because of this live stream, please check out the affiliate links in the article. If you click on one of those, no additional cost to you. We get, a free cup of coffee or something for you buying a plugin. So it'll put like a penny in our pocket and help justify getting Nick on here and making it worth his while to do these episodes and actually come on. So let's make it happen. All right. Also, the other thing that you can do to help support this podcast is support yourself and sponsor yourself by checking out one of our great full-length courses like Mixing Breakthroughs, Mastering Demystified, Compression Breakthroughs, EQ Breakthroughs. They're all guaranteed to change the way that you work forever, for the better, or your money back. They absolutely change lives. The before and after results that I hear, the testimonials I get from people saying, my goodness, I finally checked out Mixing Breakthroughs and I just had like constant eureka moment after eureka moment. It is the course that is all the stuff that I wish I knew about mixing when I was starting to get serious about mixing. It's called not only from my experience, but from 2 decades of interviewing and producing masterclasses with some of the best mixing engineers on the planet. And also all the coaching that I do for so many clients. So check out the whole series. They're awesome. Go to members.sonicscoop.com or any of the individual course links. Check them out. Your life will be changed forever for the better. Also, big shout out and thanks to a plugin company we've mentioned already, which is Sound Toys. Check out their microshift. Go get a free demo of the microshift. So if you want to know what we're talking about when we're talking about the microshift and the H3000, go to soundtoys.com. Try out anything they make for free for 30 days. Some of the most fun effects out there. Nick, really quick before I get into the next things, do you have a top 2 or 3 Sound Toys plugins that you use all the time?
I mean, Decapitator, obviously. Yep. I was just using Decapitator today in, I was switching in between T and P modes, which are amazing on drums. On drum bus, you dial that thing in until it starts cracking in this really specific way. And you get that thing around 4 or 5, you've already compressed it a bit. It's going to crack in this way that's dynamic. It's like a little laggy, and then you blend it back. You just blend it back a little bit. And like, if you just like, you're working on a breakbeat or something, that is so nice.
Sweet.
So yeah, definitely use it. If you use it yeah, just have fun with that. That's one. Microshift all the time. Microshift is a vital tool, not just for making pop stars sound like they're in tune, but also for it really is a center field clearer. It's a
Hmm.
viable tool to use on many different non-percussive instruments to get them out of the way of the center. You can put that on that, and you don't have to pan it, and it's not in the center. That's a thing a lot of people do, and it's good for that.
That's a great point too. Just in general, one of the big reasons we try to get stereo with is because it's fun to have things be wide and wrap around. But another big reason is to clear the center. Like if you have a few prominent elements that you can get out of the way of the kick, snare, vocal, and bass, like you get such a more solid center from having appropriately wide tracks. But one of the biggest things here is contrast. And we'll talk maybe at the end about some free ways that you can get with. I have a whole episode about just mixing techniques, not using any stereo enhancers, just mixing techniques that get you wider stereo width. So you can check out that full episode if you want like a 30-minute discussion. Maybe we'll do some highlights from me and Nick's domes near the end of this episode. All right, with that stuff out of the way, with that stuff out of the way, let's get into your top picks for the ones that people don't know about. Panpot 3 from Goodhertz. What makes this unique, different, special? Why do you like it?
All right. So what I really like about this plugin is that it gives you 4 different ways to tilt a signal to the left or the right. And it allows you to blend them, and it allows you to do it fast. And it's really quick. It's really good. It's really cheap. And it does a great job. So real quick, we've talked about Haas delays. You can also tilt things with EQ, like you boost more of a frequency on one side and cut it on the other. That'll tilt it to the left or right. And then you can also rotate the phase on one of the sides, which is related to delay, but not, there's always a little overlap between where phase and delay sort of begin and end. But this one lets you combine all 4, just straight level panning, and the other 3 into one useful tool to move things left or right.
Sweet. I'm just typing into the chat here as you're finishing your explanation there to let people know that we will take your questions towards the end of this episode. So if you have any, feel free to type them into the chat, and I'll be saving the best ones for the Q&A here at the end. And as
I'll
we
be
go
answering
along,
the worst ones as well, too.
Sweet. As we go along here, Nick, if there's any audio examples from this article that you think would be especially instructive to play, let us know, and we can definitely play some of them.
Let's go to the next one. The next one I think we should play.
Okay, which is, let me see if I can say this right. Panagement, like management, I guess. Panagement from Auburn Sound. Let us know what this wild-looking and different-looking plugin does. What makes it unique?
I love this thing, and it's mostly free. I have not bought the upgraded version because I don't need it. I mean, I'm sure it would be great, but I love what it is.
I see that you're down here on your screenshot says upgrade to full. You don't see that in many articles here. A good thing it doesn't say pirated, Nick goes straight to jail. But yes, go on.
Well, I think that I honestly like the guys at Auburn Sounds. I think it's just one guy. He makes stuff for every DAW. It's one of the few freebies that also works in AAX, and it's really good stuff. And he's still making it. What this is, so a little bit of context on this. I used to be, and I still kind of am, I do a lot of work in fiction podcasts back when they used to be like a big thing. I don't know if you guys remember this, but it everybody and their mother during COVID was starring in a fiction podcast because you couldn't get out to the movies. And I was working on a pretty big one, and we were looking for the best binaural immersive tools we could find, and we used everything. We tried Dolby Atmos rendering, we used a whole bunch of different and this one came out really ahead as a utilitarian binaural style panner. It not only does left to right, it also does front to back. It does it pretty convincingly. It also has several very good reverbs built in, so you can use that. It's got a tilt. And it's got spectral widening, leaning if you want to use EQ to put it more to one side or the other. It's automatable that in a very easy way. And it's got an LFO, so you can easily tweak all the parameters so they move around really however you want, sort of with an LFO, and it's free. This is one, and I think I say this in the article. It's like it's not too often that you're going to hear somebody who slings audio information say, "Listen to this on the worst possible headphones that you have," or "Listen to this on your laptop speakers." But that's what I'm going to say. Like if you want to listen to this example on your laptop speaker or a stereo phone. If your iPhone can play stereo and you're listening that way, go ahead and give it a shot, because this thing does not just move left to right. So many binaural panners collapse in headphones. This one does not.
Right.
So yeah, let's go take a listen to it. I think I put
first
it on
audio example here.
Yeah. What did I put it on?
Banjo. Sounds like a banjo. Yeah. Very cool. So it's really allowing us to pinpoint, like place it in a space.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in the next example, I think I show off the LFO a little bit more.
Check it out. And what is the LFO doing? What is it modifying?
So you can set it to modify either how far away it is, how left to right it is, the gain of it, and I think something else I can't see. Is it tilt? Yeah, you can just general sort of EQ tilt.
Interesting.
And it's funny. I'm listening, as you know, on mono. It comes to mono to me, and it's interesting. You don't get a ton of like EQ weird smeary artifacts in mono, so it actually kind of works.
And I mean, I think part of that is it's not just a binaural panner in and of itself, like it is a reverbified binaural panner, if that makes sense.
It can be if you want it to be, but
it can be totally dry too.
It can be totally dry. So many of those reverb panners, like the THX one, what's the one that everybody was using for a minute that had like the big head in the center? It was Plug-in Alliance for a bit, and then they split off from Plug-in Alliance.
Dear VR, maybe?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. They have ambiances built in that, I don't know, maybe I have the wrong head shape, but they always sound freaking wrong to me. This one does not. This one sounds pretty good.
Yeah, there's actually a really good one that came out recently. There's a company from France, I'm forgetting their name off the top of my head, that came out with the most natural, best sounding, I think, binaural dry panner that I've heard so far. But yeah, I want to hear what happens when you're turning up the spectral knob, because that's really doing something.
Yeah,
that's with the spectral knob off. Oh, let me go back to, I think here is where you start to mess around with the spectral knob. Interesting. It becomes like more and less amorphous almost.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's doing the thing that a couple of other plugins we're going to cover later do.
Oh, and there's the LFO.
Yep.
Where it's bouncing left to right.
Yep.
So it's a little bit like Pan Man from Sound Toys, like an auto panner kind of thing.
Yeah. Pan Man also gives you like envelope followers and things like that, and trigger, like dynamic triggers. This one just gives you an LFO. You can't listen. It's free. You can't. You want it to respond to audio input, put it in Reaper, and it'll do it. But
fair enough. All right, very cool. So another one here, this is a relatively new one called DuoPan from APL. So far, we're 3 for 3 in plugins I had not heard of before I checked out this article of yours. So what's the story with DuoPan? What does this guy do? It looks like a big pan knob, but then there's these other knobs. What's happening?
It's you know what? It's somewhat similar to the pan pot one. It is a blend between amplitude and time of panning, so you can use one or the other, and it's got its own flavor, its own very natural sound to it. You can scale how the time works, so that you can control it more. And what is more interesting to me is that you can pan the low end one way and the high end another way. This is it's made by a company that it's not every day that Bobcats will endorse your plugin, and this is one of those ones that Bobcats does in fact endorse. So
Sweet. For those of you guys who don't know, Bob Katz is the guy who wrote the book on mastering audio, quite literally, the book Mastering Audio. Now, and it's, I don't know, his third edition right now. But yeah, he is definitely a force. Very cool.
He's a force to be reckoned with.
Is this something we should... Go ahead.
Nah, I think we could skip over because we've covered 3 panners in a row. I think we can get into other stuff.
Fair enough. So maybe whatchamacallit, Pan Man should be in this category as well of individual instrument panners, but that might be one that people have heard of. It's kind of like an auto panner, and maybe I'll add that to the beginning of the article along with the H3000 and the
yeah. I mean, if you want to take a minute to shout out Sound Toys again, definitely Pan Man is a great you know, is an absolute banger of a stereo with tool.
And what's super interesting is when you hit that tweak knob and you get some of the things like the envelope followers and stuff you were talking about, and being able to change the shape of the panning. So really interesting stuff when you expand it. It could be so simple. I mean, here we're looking at the basic 3-knob operation, but if you hit this tweak knob, there's this whole other set of parameters that are very similar to what's in Tremolator that are just amazing. Let me see if I can just bring that up real quick. Pan Man tweak controls, just so people can see what's in there functionally.
The reason I
like
didn't include it or Guitar Rig has another deep set for this kind of stuff is because, well, you know, stereo, like very active stereo movement, I think is a different thing from stereo.
Then what? You know, that's a good point. Yeah, very true. And I think what's happening with at least the first selection that I got to hear there is that it's not just an LFO sending things back and forth. It is widening and spatializing, and you can move it to the side and then widen it at the side or center it at the side. And I thought that was a really interesting component of it, that you can put it somewhere in the spectrum and then control width or narrowness from that relative point. And I think that's very different than something like Pan Man.
But Pan Man is great. I mean, like, Pan Man's great for just so many different things. You know, I love a good choppy left to right, you know, vocal in the bridge or something like that is kind of cool.
Sweet. All right. Finally, a plugin. You're making me not feel totally uncool because I've seen this one before. I've seen and heard Wider. This is the first and maybe only plugin in your whole list that I've seen and heard. Polyverse Wider Infected Mushroom. Tell us what's different about this. Really simple controls here, but what makes this one special?
Well, if you go down to the sort of screenshot of the video that you've got here, I think that shows it off. What it's doing is it's making these cuts and boosts on the left and the right. So the more you widen it, the more cuts and boosts it puts in the left and right signal, which also, you know, messes with the phase. It's not a linear phase plugin. And that has a kind of widening effect that is highly mono compatible because when it folds down to mono, it's just the original signal minus the little phase shift here and there. And thus it doesn't cancel anything out. So it's really good if you don't want those, if you don't want that just sort of like wide, you know, delaying one channel Haas effect thing that sounds like weird static chorusing when you fold it into mono.
Let me see if I could repeat this back to you. So on something like the stereoize function in Isotope Ozone, what's happening is it's probably multi-band, so probably different bands are going to be delayed by different amounts. So maybe from 100 to 200 hertz, we're delaying by 6 milliseconds, but then we're delaying by a different amount or delaying by 6 milliseconds on the other side at another band. What this is doing is it's taking a mono signal and then separating it out. So it's like, we're going to pan 100 to 200 to this side, and we're going to pan 200 to 300 to this side, and so on and so forth. So when it goes to mono, it's just the original signal, but it's adding. Wow. Interesting.
And if you do this with a regular EQ, by the way, it doesn't sound the same. It doesn't sound right. You got to chop it up exactly the way they're chopping it up. And since that's free and one knob, go with God, my son. It's great. You know, like it just does. This was my favorite on the acoustic guitar example. So I'm going to hear nothing because it's all mono.
Oh, we're definitely hearing it.
Now I'm hearing a little bit that far. There I'm not. And I think I'm going to bring in the rest of the band somewhere later in this.
Sure.
Nothing ever seems to change around here. Still working by the hour and not
This is a great artist, by the way. This is Pete Mancini.
Rows of houses we'll never call home. The more we laugh, the more we feel alone.
Sweet, I love it. And it can be extremely chorusy and effecty sounding when we went out, to this second set of color bars where even you're listening in mono. For those of you who don't understand that, he's like, you guys are all hearing in stereo, but the audio examples for him, just because of how we're connected, are coming to him in mono. And when we got past the dark blue to this stuff, then you could hear that canceling a little bit in mono on your side. But whenever we're under this 100% range, it's pretty much completely mono compatible. So you have these two levels. Super duper chorusy that's not as mono compatible, and then just kind of pleasantly wide and sounds like it was done with stereo mics that is mono compatible. So really nice.
And again, that's because of the phase shifts that all these little EQ notches are introducing. Yeah. One has to imagine that if this was linear phase, it would be it would be really it would probably
use a lot of processing. Yes, and it would use a ton of processing power too, I'd imagine.
Yeah, probably.
All right. Your next pick, another one, we're back to ones I've never seen before. Super weird looking GUI, Skyline. Tell us about this.
Okay, so one of the things you can do with the Ozone imager that we talked about in its stereoizing things is this is a trick that a lot of people like, is on a chorus, you put it on a lead vocal and you just for the chorus automate it in. On one of those stereoizing modes, if it's a mono vocal, if you have it across a whole vocal bus, maybe not, but it's up to you. And that gives it a nice little sort of width presence for the vocal. I think this does a better job of doing that because it is a multi-band stereo processor that aggressively or not so aggressively suppresses transients. So it'll not do the widening to the transients, which is important, and it will it'll move things. You can move things to the left or the right if you want, but there's this width knob which does the usual side thing. But the spread knob, the developer, who's a friend of mine, he has this sort of reverb that isn't a reverb that he put into this, and the spread knob just sort of puts that in there, and I think it sounds pretty damn good in making your next level of vocal stand out. I don't think we need to go into the example on this one. I think people can hear it for themselves because it's pretty subtle. But it's like another one that's just like, also you can't beat the low price of free. So like, you know,
try it out for yourself. If you don't want to go, if you don't want to go through the trouble of downloading for yourself, click on the article link. We've got affiliate links in there for the ones that aren't free. But just hit the play button on this and you can hear the audio examples for yourself if you don't want to go through the trouble of downloading it. Now, finally, another one that I've seen before. I don't feel like the squarest guy in the chat anymore. M Stereo Spread, Melda Productions. Some people know about them, some people don't, but they make they have some good free utility stuff and some really interesting tools.
Yeah.
You say, think about this like a paid version of Wider. So it's a similar kind of thing where we are doing EQ separation to either side. And what makes it different and better than Wider?
You have absolute control over with like you can focus it more towards the low or the highs. You can put it into the mid range if you want. There's narrowing parameters. You can control how many bands there is. It's just finer points of control, and the plugin does have its own Haas generation part of it too that I didn't even really get into.
I see that delay based generator at the bottom there.
Yeah. What this thing really sounds great on for me is it's fantastic for automating, say you're working on a rock song and you already have your guitars left and right and you just want that last chorus to go a little bit wider. This is one you tile it in 30% on that last chorus. It'll really get you there. So I like it for that. I also like it, believe it or not, on mono room mics that you want to be more stereo. You do a little bit of this and then put it into like a really short verb at sort of like halfway, and that could do some cool stuff. Also, if you've gotten like a stereo capture from two overheads that aren't doing what you want, this will also be great for that, for just
Sweet.
widening out just a little bit. Let your snare in that instance, you got to let your snare and your kick really reign supreme. Don't get your drum capture in this instance from those overheads. Let them be wide. Let them be character. But it works.
Gotcha.
Great for
Nice.
home recorded drums. That's what I'm sort of saying.
Dig it. All right. Next ones are both from Air Windows. This is the plugin company with the simplest GUI in the universe.
Yeah, it doesn't even have one. It relies
Yes.
on your DAW to make it for you.
Right. So both Seriously and Sweet Wide are from Air Windows. I know you're a big fan. Tell us what these two do.
So Seriously, Chris will never tell you this outright, but it models an old Howard Hughes product. And he made it for a rather famous, his name escapes me, but he made it for a rather famous, like sort of synth and noise musician, and he considered the first version a failure, but this is the third version, and they get successively cooler. The third version has this non-lin control, which adds a sort of ring. I think it's either ring modulation or frequency. It's some sort of frequency modulation that just sort of blends in and sort of like tremulates the effect ever so subtly. So that's Seriously, and Seriously sounds like really weird on its own. Where it sounds really great is like on a reverb or on a parallel vocal. Like if you put it on your vocal bus, on your if you have like a different background vocal bus, and they come in for the chorus, and you just want to be a little bit wider for that last chorus. Perfect. And again, you don't want to use the same plugin on both, like, because then it's going to make a mush. You know, you do kind of want to use like, let's use this thing because this will accentuate it in this way for this one, and let's use this one for this one. So you're not just going to use, you know, the M stereo spreader wider on a guitar bus, and then that also on this. You want to use different ones, and this one I think really shines on verbs and vocals in particular. Drums, I would probably leave it off of drums. It's too weird for drums, but it is very cool, and it's got its own, like, there is nothing that sounds like this. You're not going to find anything that sounds like this.
Yeah, here's the original unit. I'm not personally familiar with it myself. Is this one that we should hear audio examples on either?
Yeah, why not? Let's hear let's hear it in its weirdest form first, which is the first example, because that will really give you sort of an idea. So this is like a whole drum bus, and I've just put it on there to show you how weird it is.
Oh yeah, it's just like Cancellation City.
Yup, but it's very interesting because the cancellations are expertly curated, you know? And listen, I'm listening on mono, and it's actually doing okay.
All right.
And then
here it is on a reverb.
Yeah, where is this? Where am I using it?
Oh,
wait,
wow,
this is
That's
no,
crazy.
this is the weird one. Yeah, this is me showing off how weird it is. I believe I use it on a guitar reverb in the next section.
Wow, what it's doing to the splat on that snare is just wild.
Yeah, it would actually be good on an 80s style snare reverb. I've used it.
Sure. So the next one is just on a reverb. That I think could be a really interesting application to wide reverb, where you don't necessarily mind things being comb filtered.
Yeah. You jump around a bit. I think it's going to be that guitar solo. And there I'm blending it back into taste. And then I think you're going to hear it in the whole mix, and it's going to sound...
Oh yeah, and spreading just the reverb, not the dry guitar.
Exactly.
Ooh, let's hear that again. Interesting. Yeah, I really like that idea of that application of using something this weird at stereo spreading. Sounds kind of wrong on dry tracks, but on a reverb, man, beautiful. And then
Yeah,
what's the
it's like
difference?
putting AI in the side chain, like AI might be weird, but you put it on the side chain of something, it could do something cool.
Fair enough.
And then this is the
Sweet
other one.
Wide, what does that one do?
This one is a parallel. Sorry, this injects gnarly grunge distortion and ring modulation into the side signal.
Let's hear a
Why
little
would
bit of
you
that.
want this? Let's listen on the guitars. You can hear I'm automating it into the guitars. That's it too much. But you edge it in, and it's a way of widening without, it's you get your wider guitars that are already left and right.
Right.
Come up right. Yeah, so it's a
Interesting.
good
Yeah.
one for that.
All right. And now you have a couple of other categories. Because I want to front load what's going to be most interesting to the most people, I feel like we should do a whole separate one on this whole idea of console replacement and how a console getting width from stereo consoles. Let's just go over this idea really quick, and then I want to jump to what I think is going to be really important for a lot of people, which is the stereo bus tools, because I think that's what so many people are going to be interested in. We should spend a lot of time on. But really quick, let's get your pitch for you. Have a few different tools here that all fall into the category of analog summing, but in the box. Like they're digital analog summers, if that makes any sense. What do these tools do, and how do they do it? And why is there so much controversy about whether they do anything?
Okay, so there's a lot of controversy around summing boxes. Back in the day, people either thought they were, can you curse on this podcast or not? No, right? They're full of full of sibilance. Full of it or not. What summing mixers were supposed to do was replicate the architecture of summing everything through a mixing desk. I personally found that when I got my Dangerous 2 LT, which is no longer in the rack, my Dangerous Bus LT, it made a difference. And when Dan Worrell made a very famous test where he showed off a nameless summing mixer, and he showed that the difference between summing his mix through it and summing his mix through two channels of it was noise.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, that's it, mic drop, summing mixers. Well, I went and did that test, and I probably should post the results with the Dangerous. And nope, it did not cancel out. There was a inherently different wide sound to me doing it this way. That having been said, I don't use these tools anymore, the hardware ones. I use the software. The software has gotten good enough. And I really do think that the proof, like I know we want to skirt by it, but there's two I've highlighted. There's the Mark Daniel Nelson one, which they hit me about this before it came to market. And I was actually trying to get it out for Sonic Scoop, but they went live with it before I could. This thing is one of the friggin' widest plugins I've ever heard. And you just put this on the mix and it's going to naturally make things wider, maybe too much so, but if you put it on at the beginning, it's really going to help you out. I love it for that. It's replaced my it's replaced my summing mixer. If I'm mixing in the box, which is all last year I was mixing in the box because I was moving, it's very useful. This and the one that comes next.
So what do we think is happening beyond the added noise? Would it be slight EQ differences and slight saturation differences on either side? Because I know that Plugin Alliance, with their Brainworks tolerance modeling technology, their idea is you throw all of these on separate channels, and there's going to be slight differences from channel to channel that will maybe give us a little bit of difference between left and right, and can create a little bit of additional width and depth.
I've measured that, and I've done articles for that, and it does work. It does sound good. The one I'm about to show you is hands down better. I can tell you about the one that's this, but the one above, this Mark Daniel Nelson one, I have it somewhere. I ran it through Plugin Doctor, and what you're going to see, I've never at that. Maybe now I don't in this video. Maybe now it's different, but at the time, this was a year and a half ago, I ran it through Plugin Doctor. I'd never seen a plugin behave like this in Plugin Doctor. It never stopped moving, the squiggles. It was like real, like if you run your analog gear through Plugin Doctor, it's going to have these little movements and squiggles. And if you just put it like a digital thing, it's just going to be flat. This thing never stops moving. It is constantly jumping in that little way. And if you look at the Hammerstein, the harmonic distortion, also doing that. And if you look at the mid side of it, it's really crazy what it's doing. It's a lot. We can play the audio example now. It's controllable. They've updated it to make it more controllable. This version is, but I just
thoughts and prayers, but sticks to his guns. Sleep safe atop his hill. Launder campaign funds. There's a graft in his pocket. Bible in his hand, we don't need.
I do hear what you mean about it's subtle, but pulling out to the sides by 5% or something. Like there is that slightly more wraparound. And this is without you using the EQ or other functions in there. It's just the box tone of the unit.
It's an API preamp going into, I think, a 6-7, like an Unfairchild, I think, or this line amp, and that's what's doing it. And it's bipulsar modular, and they really know what the F they're doing over there. I'm sorry. I know a lot of people think that a lot of people have a lot of issues with that company too for some reason, but they're pleasant. I think they're pleasant. And their tools are, yes, they're more expensive, but they're friggin' worth it.
It is really funny. Like I debuted a new plugin on this channel recently, just when it came out, a new limiter that we were talking about, the AO1, which I thought was very nice and very different from other limiters. And it's $229. And there was, half dozen comments that said $200 for a plugin. And I'm like, that makes me feel so old to hear people complaining about $200 plugins. Cause that's like every single plugin when it came out for the longest time was like $250. Like that's just what plugins cost until Waves and Plugin Alliance and a few others got us expecting plugins to be like $40, $29.99 on sale all the time. But like before that, plugins legit did cost $200, $250 for like every plugin that you want to have. That was the norm.
They really did. And it's funny because the mixing economy is kind of collapsed. Like mixing engineers are not getting paid more than they used to. So
I think there's an in between there. Like there was this time when like it totally collapsed where, like mixing work went away. But I think there are people now who have reestablish themselves where I've seen rates from really good people going back up, because I think there are levels to mixing and people are starting to realize that. But there's also this new level of mixer that wouldn't have existed before, right? Yeah, like you were either going to be making a lot for a mix or you weren't going to be mixing, or you just get thrown like the album tracks that nobody cared about or projects that nobody cared about. And it would be like in the studio day rate. So you were either one of these mixers who was charging a lot, or like you weren't mixing. But now there are these lower tiers of work that just didn't exist. So that's a whole complex conversation we could have, because I feel like there's a few different levels of it. Yes. But it is true that there are definitely people who were earning more at one point where that went down. But then there's also people who have started in the past 10 years at these very low new rates that existed, that you didn't used to exist, who have worked their way up. People who started at $50 a song who now make $750 a song, or in some cases $1,500 a song. So that exists as well. But yeah, there's different levels to the game. Anyway,
and it's a changeable, malleable game. So it's like, why wouldn't the plugins be cheaper if we're getting paid less? That's my point.
Fair enough. Okay, yeah.
But the ones that are good, sometimes Ziad from I don't know, I think he's based in Oman or something, but they spent a lot of time making these things, and this one sounds really good, man.
Sweet.
Let's do the next one.
One that I imagine costs less, the Hot Summer and the Analog Molecule from Doc Shadrach. These, again, have never heard of these before. I did hear the Mark Daniel Nelson one, so that one I've heard of. This, again, has like an Air Windows kind of vibe, where the GUI is just like words. So tell me about these.
I want you to play it first, and then we'll get into what this is, because it sounds too crazy if otherwise.
Here we go.
So just listen on good
headphones. Sends thoughts and prayers, but sticks to his guns. Sleep safe atop his hill. Launder campaign funds. There's a graft in his pocket. Bible in his hand. We don't need a monument to that kind of man. We don't need a monument. That kind of man.
I especially heard it in the first time it went in and out. Especially when it was like even more sparse when it first went in and out. It does sound more analogy when it's on. Like there's a little bit of crunchiness and a little bit of like spaciousness, like increased depth. There's almost like it goes further back the mix instead of being all forward. Like there's additional level of depth. Yeah.
Now go and play all three of them together, because that's the next video. Because that to me is just like, what? Like that's almost too much.
This is out. And that's in, yeah.
I think that's out.
Oh, that's in. I see. What's this DAW you're in here?
This is Reaper.
Reaper. Okay, so orange is out and then blue is in, kind of like Pro Tools. All right, let's check that again. Out. Yeah, it gets a little bit smearier, almost like it's going to a tape machine. Now we're into stuff that's way more subtle than I mean, I know what you're saying, it's a lot, but relative to the kinds of stuff we were listening to before, we went from mono guitar to wide, it's subtle relative to that. But I definitely hear what you're talking about.
This is the shit. This is the stuff that is the difference between like an in the box mix that's like, why is it not doing what I want? And that problem is solved. I can go now and just think about other things.
This is often like some of the kinds of stuff that's happening when I am mastering things, and some of the smaller changes that I'm looking to do of like, can I just like make the back pull back further and make the front pull forward more and just like subtly wrap and stuff like that. Yeah. Like the non-EQ things that I'm doing, they're the kinds of things I'm looking to do in mastering to a degree. So I'm sensitive to it, but these are the examples where I feel like the person who is not a total audio nerd is going to have to play around with the before and after.
What is the comments saying about the before and after on that thing?
Let's see if we have folks in the chat. Yahoo, the man is back, says Musictron. The people are pleased to see you, Nick. Vel Curves says you get what you pay for when it comes to plugins. Sometimes not true. There's some great free plugins there where you get a lot more than what you pay for.
I think we covered some.
Yeah, you guys let us know what have your favorite before and afters have been, which ones felt subtle to you and which ones felt extreme to you. And now that I've solicited that feedback, maybe we'll get some. Now, this next one we have to talk about a little bit because this is the first plugin here, a stereo bus tool. So now we're going to get into the stuff that I think will probably... Yeah. Man, we've been going for almost an hour now, Nick. I feel like we can go for another hour, but let's try to wrap it up in 15 or so. Stereo bus tools, this is going to be interesting to people. But yeah, maybe we'll go to half an hour. I don't know. Fraz from Noisebud. Again, I've never heard of it, but I see something very odd on this. There is a control on here that says Messitte. That's your name. Did you make this plugin?
I did not. I have absolutely nothing to do. In fact, the name was used without my permission. I merely emailed the guy when he made the first version and said, hey, I want you to, the distortion you're adding is too much. Can we have like a bandpass or low pass filter on it so it's not so crackly? And he was like, sure. And it came out and he called it the Messitte knob. So,
okay. Very interesting.
But it illustrates a point, though, that these indie developers, you can reach out to them and they will do things for you because they love what they're doing. So yeah, I got absolutely no kickback on this. I've seen my name plenty of times. I don't need to see it again. I almost didn't include it because it has my name. But what this thing does is it combines distortion and dynamics in a very interesting way. It's an envelope follower that adds a bit of interesting distortion that you can put into the sides. And it has the effect of giving you a very subtle feeling of stereo width. And there's a reason why, like the last tools I put in, those are things I wouldn't like. I would, if someone gave me a mix to master, and I do master, I'm probably not going to reach and put in that MDN tool because that is too, that's going to change what they gave me. Unless their vibe was like, I need this to be that, I'm not going to do that. This, however, is going to be more subtle. And so what it's going to do is it's going to add, it can either track the micro dynamics, like if you have a groove that's like, the distortion will follow that, or you could have it follow verse, chorus if you want. You can tune it to do that. And then you can put it into the sides or just a little bit of the sides or mostly the sides. And it will just give you this feeling of movement and dynamism. between the center and the sides.
So are you saying that depending on the dynamics, when
Yep.
when the level is hotter versus quieter, it would increase, say, once we get past a certain threshold in level, it's going to increase the distortion on just the sides? Is that the basic concept here?
Yes, and you can blend it in parallel too. But you can use this in stereo as well, or dual mono. But I use it mostly on the sides, and it is a pretty subtle way of adding width without going too crazy.
Gotcha.
This is the distortion way of adding width rather than the EQ or time-based way of adding width.
And is that mid-side capability built right into the plugin, or are you doing other things to use it?
It's some difference. It doesn't say mid-side. Some difference. Yeah. I usually have that thing set straight to difference. Messitte quarter of the way up. Magic on. Magic does a thing. I don't know what Magic. Sometimes he puts things into place. I don't know what they do, but they just sound good. This is one of those things. And then the envelope release is one of the controls you use to follow there's this envelope envelope release.
How quickly it lets go from the change that is done. Gotcha. So sub all the way to the left is affecting just the mid, and difference all the way to the right is affecting just the sides.
That is correct. And also, if you decide to use it as a tune that follows the sections of your tune rather than the microdynamics, it has controls that allows you to bring up just the times when it's not being used in level to compensate for the level. It's got also it's got this really nifty feature that's being covered by our faces for the GUI, where it's in black and white when it's not distorting. So it's neat. A very clear indicator of when it's on and off. And you can turn that on and off if you want. So yeah, it's just all around. It's a very, like, if you just want like something subtle, something for lack of a word, analog, to beef up your sides, this is the one.
That's very interesting, because so often I'm using saturators purposefully in exactly the opposite way, where I want to do all of my dynamic range control before I get to the saturator, so the saturator can just be really consistent. And this is doing the opposite of that. And it reminds me of, like, well, it depends on what you want, right? Do you want the thing to sound more distorted as it gets louder, or do you want to have a certain amount of saturation that just is there regardless? And that is why you'd put it before or after dynamic range control. Right. I'm reminded of, I remember first experiencing this, it was like on an Aretha Franklin record, where when she got loud, the vocal got so much more distorted, even though it was at the same level, because like there was compression happening, but she was hitting some gain stage first, like some old tube gain stage. And like when she was belting, like the thing would just crunch and crackle. And it sounded so not modern to me. It sounded like, ooh, that's something you would try to avoid today. And people were trying to get away from that. And in a way, it was harsh and annoying and not good, but in a way it had so much personality. I think most of us want to avoid that most of the time, but there are times and places like, do we want to break up a little bit as they're getting louder, even though they're actually not getting louder? So I guess that's where you do something like this before your dynamic stages, so you could maximize the variation, I'd imagine.
Well, honestly, this one actually, in my chain, it tends to be rather late, and it tends to be used in very small amounts in parallel. And you wouldn't believe it, but I use it on acoustic mixes all the time. It's just got more, it's not quite, I hear what you're saying, and you can get it to do that, but what's really lovely about this one is that it doesn't have to do that.
It can be more smooth and subtle than what I'm talking about, where it just bumps up a little bit because we got to a loud section because we're using it in macro dynamics, or if we were using it in the micro mode, I would imagine it would just maybe catch the slightly loudest words, or maybe just our transients or something. But I imagine there's some tuning you can do there as well.
Yeah, there is. And on this example, which you don't have to play if you don't want to, I use it on the acoustic mix that I've been showing out, and I use it very, very, very subtly. And
all right. Well, for these subtle ones, I'm going to let people hear these on their own without us talking over them. Check out this plugin. It's one of these inexpensive indie developer ones. So download it, try it out, or just listen to the audio examples here in the article if you want to do that before you get to it. Let's try to go a little further here. Pulsar Audio. This one is an interesting looking plugin. It has some API looking controls and some modern looking spectrographic-y thingies going on. So what's the story with this?
Okay, first of all, cop this setting. This is my This is my stereo bus set. This is what my API down here is
Screen
usually set
capping
to.
it right now.
And it's just a little tickle, and it's really nice on really, really aggressive mixes. So, all right. What this section of the article tries to get at is that mid-side compression and dual mono compression across a stereo mix are valid tools if you know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And this tool is especially good at achieving those effects because of its sidechain linking and because of its box tone makes it pretty usable on lots of material that comes too bright. And it's the transfer curves are based in normal mode. They're based on the API, but the API 2500. This is called the IPA 25.
Sure.
25% by volume. But if you hit there's a tube. I think this is Verimu. I can't really see. And an N diode.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it's allowing you to change the feeling of it a little bit to be more like a Neve style diode bridge comp or a Verimu compressor.
Mm-hmm.
I love this thing for mid-side compression, and I love it for dual mono compression, specifically because the side chain allows you to like make sure your kick stays okay and your snare stays okay, but the rest of them can vacillate, which can really like you decohere the left from the right a little bit or the mids from the sides just a little bit, and it's some beautiful stuff. And what's wonderful on this one is that if you link the compression behavior so that it is compressing somewhat the same on the mids and the sides, you don't pull the mix apart too much because it is getting compressed the same, just less on the sides.
Yeah.
And then, I tend to find that what happens is I push I'm doing more compression on the mids and I'm doing a little makeup gain on the mids to counter it. And then I'm usually taking the sides and going like 0.5 dB past where the mids were, so that it's just a little wider, and it works, man. It just works.
Sweet.
It just sounds
yeah,
great.
I do a mid-side compression sometimes in mastering, and I will say I do love. There's a very small number of compressors out there that have stereo delinking, decorrelation. That's something we're seeing on more and more limiters these days, but there's still only a handful of analog modeled compressors that have that kind of thing. I think the MBC from Plug and Alliance, another API-ish kind of one, was one of them. But yeah, super
you know
useful.
what? Well, anyone that's modeled on an API 2500 is going to have that. The bus processor, I think the bus processor from Softtube, which is another glue style compressor, does as well. Yeah.
Sweet. All right, Punctuate from Newfangled Audio. This is a cool brand. I'm trying to remember his last name. Is Gillespie, the guy who designs these? Dan Gillespie. The first one I tried from them was their three-way compressor distortion limiter box. Super cool.
Elevate.
I'm trying to remember. Elevate. Yeah, I did actually a video about Elevate when it came out. Really great to just learn the difference between different modes of dynamic control. I think it's a great plugin. A bit of a sleeper, not enough people use it. Awesome. Then you're one of the cool ones. More of these people should check out Elevate. Check out my video on Elevate if you want to understand exactly what's going on. I have not yet used Punctuate.
Yeah, well, bonus points on Elevate. If you put Limitless right afterwards, they're two limiters that work really well together. Elevate can make things really spiky, and Limitless just calms it back down, and the two of them push-pull beautifully together. So Punctuate comes from the transient section of Elevate. And this is almost a corrective tool for stereo width, because one of the things I like and if we do actually get to the point where we talk about techniques, if people seem to, want to hear more about that, one of the things that I find really, really helps in maintaining a good sense of stereo width is making sure your transients are heard. You move things around phasally, you move things around the stereo plane. They're going to be in an ocean. You need some land to know where your ocean is. You need to have the contrast. You need to be able to see a mountain and see see a body of water and know the difference. You can't just have all water, or else you don't know where your horizon is. I could just keep going with this metaphor, but let's not. But so with this plugin, in the past, you had to be very, very careful with that, making sure you're not smearing stuff. But this plugin, in a very interesting way, allows you to rescue your transients a bit when you say you've done this width thing late in the game, and you come back the next day and you're like, oh man, this mix is just wash. But I really do like the width, but it's just too much. It's like, if you dial back the width like 10% and put 10% of this on, that's going to really help. What this does is, it's a very complicated transient designer, basically, that follows 26 bands that can go for the mids, the lows, the highs. You can tailor it however you want, and you just blend a little touch of it in, and it just gives it enough grab so that you can really feel where your wide points are.
Sweet.
That's it.
All right. Since we've gotten almost an hour and a half into this stream, I'm going to say that, no, you're doing great. I absolutely love hearing you go on. I know that both of us have to get to wives and kids soon, and people on the YouTubes might be intimidated by an hour and a half video. So this last little bit, I'm just going to take some questions from the audience and kind of go through really quick, a quick overview of what's left in here. There's a couple more. We should probably talk a tiny bit about bass lane. I'm just going to go overview of all of these, and then we'll just say a couple notes on all of them. We're getting to corrective tools. That was the last of your alternative stereo wideners. We've got bass lane, we've got Ancora, and we've got elliptical. I think those were the last. Oh, and there's also center one. So these are your, can you give us a quick 1 or 2 sentences on each of these, and then we'll get into some audience questions and close it down. So 1 or 2 sentences, what's special about bass lane? What does it do?
Best side channel high pass filter you can get for that elliptical effect, bar none. Amazing narrowing and widthing with widening capabilities and good compression. It's just a stellar, beautiful product for you just need to make one little bit wider and one little bit not as wide. This is just, the sound is just unbeatable. So
gotcha. And it looks like it almost has multiple bands of low
It doesn't.
end.
That's a correlation.
There's a correlation meter. Gotcha. Just showing how the low end is correlated. Gotcha. So this is like the elliptical filter on my mastering console on steroids, where you have extra control over, and it's an elliptical filter that can go both ways, both widening and narrowing.
Yeah. And it's beautiful.
Sweet.
This is the newest one. I love this thing.
And
this thing is almost like, the way I would phrase it is, this thing is like a spectral resonance suppressor for things that are too wide. So when you listen to what's left behind of this, it very much sounds like the delta of a Soothe or a Speccraft. It has it's basically just taken stuff that just is too washy to be on the sides and just bringing it in, and it's very, very subtle.
Pokiness from the sides. Is that something you would do on an entire mix or in a problem stereo element?
This both, and this really is this is one of those come in handy, set it and forget it. You dial it in if you have a mix that's just like insanely strange sounding.
So this is smooth out my overly pokey cymbals and acoustic guitars.
I would say this is more like smooth out my guy who used way too many reverbs on the mix.
Oh, interesting. Gotcha.
Yeah, and so that you can't have a sense of where anything is anymore.
Sweet. Elliptical from Tokyo Dawn Labs, so another elliptical style filter.
This one is, Tokyo Dawn Labs are just, they're the shiz. This is so good. This one has this thing where it doesn't just filter, you can have it so it's like a normal elliptical filter, but it could also just filter out what isn't correlating between the left and the right. So it measures in real time what's below 0 on a correlation meter, below, where your cutoff filter is, and only will filter that. And for that alone, I mean, that's another one. It's like the one above. It's just really transparent. You can
and
also
what would you use it to do? What problem is it solving for you?
Out of phase bass is the big one for this. Out of phase guitars would be another one.
So trying to make things that are more cohesive and solid in a way?
Yes, without losing the stereo width. So it's a really good Rainer inner. And this is, cool. And then center one is just bizarre.
I've used this one.
Yeah, well, the whole thing about center one is that instead of decorrelating things into mid and side, it gets you individual left, center, right, and this allows you to pinpoint things and bring them up or down much more specifically than a mid side. Because the problem with, like, say you've got a hard panned electric guitar in your left channel and it's not in your right channel. Well, it's going to be in your sum channel and it's going to be in your difference channel, because
Right.
it's one's plus and one's minus. This, not so much. It's only going to be in your left channel. It's its own mode, and it nulls with itself. So it's very, very, very clean. I use this for things like in the audio example that you're going to hear. We won't play it now, but I got a whole master. The background vocals were so reverberated in this one section that they were detracting from the sense of width. I put on this to separate the background vocals from the main vocals. I put on the ozone. First I put on ozone stem, I think, to separate vocals. Then this to separate the background vocals. And then I used a transient designer and a polarity switch. So basically, I made my own reverb cancel outer, and I couldn't have done it without this.
I wonder if this would be a total mess, but I almost wonder if you could take your master, create 3 instances of it, one that's just your left without the center, one that's just the center without the left or right, and one that's just the right without the left or center, and then like put an EQ differently on each one of them. I almost wonder,
totally.
Is there a plugin though that has that baked in yet? Because what plugins will do these days is you'll have like an EQ you can do on the mid or on the sides, or you can do it in left and right mode. But I don't think I've seen an EQ that will allow you to do EQ just left separately from both center and right. And would that be a phasey mess to do? And are there any plugins that do that?
So the short answer is not to my knowledge, because these are the guys that only have this code, this decorrelation method. I can tell you though, that if you run this in a host like Reaper or Cubase, or I think Nuendo, you can route the plugin so that it has 3 separate outputs, exactly like that, and then you can process them. And I do that. I mean, I would do that if I get I was working on this project where I was only just getting stems, and but the guy did left guitar and right guitar. This is how I isolated my guitars.
Sweet.
Works great.
All right. Let's take some questions from the audience. Isomatic says, hey, Justin, favorite stereo with tools are the Spreader by ImageLine, mainly because it's FL Studio stock. So it's built into FL Studio. He's a big fan of Wider, which we heard. I thought that was really interesting for taking something mono and spreading it out in a phase coherent way. And Ozone Imager, which I use all the time. I mainly use Delay as a widening tool for individual tracks, or do it manually in arrangement. And yeah, I would say the biggest mix tip I would give you for width in general is wideners are great and fun, and sometimes you need to take something and actually make it wider and get it out of the center. But the biggest thing you can do is just make arrangement and mixing choices where you take 1 or 2 elements that have some difference in rhythm and or tonality and pan them hard left, right. And if you do that with like 2 things, your entire mix sounds wide. And if you listen to your widest mixes that you'll ever hear, there's often a little bit of that happening where it's baked into the arrangement that if you have 2 guitars that are somewhat similar in tone but have slightly different tones and then are playing slightly different rhythms and you pan them hard left, right, like that is the number one way to get things like super wide. And you can do it with things that are less related. So those are the things you should look for first. Like, what panning decisions can I make? And you can't do it to everything, because if you do that to 6 different instruments, then you get, just stereo spread slop. But if you just pick a couple of elements to do that with, that seems to be the thing that gives width more than anything else. Like, if you try to make everything be stereo, you don't end up necessarily with super wide sounding mixes. But if you pick a couple of things to juxtapose on each side, I think that's where true width comes from. Anything you'd add to there?
One, I can't see you anymore, which makes me sad.
Oh, my goodness. I can't believe that I was talking that long. It was just your face reacting to me. This is why I'm not a cameraman. I don't do lights.
The other thing I would say is, LCR mixing, I think, is really like, like, to add to that, like LCR, your wholly left, your wholly center, and your wholly right. Like, those really those really are your sacred spaces. And yes, a wide mix is 100% in the arrangement. And if you're a mixing engineer and you've probably gotten a mix from someone that has way too much stuff going on, and you're like, well, it doesn't just affect width, it also affects loudness. The more stuff is in a mix, the less wide and less loud it's going to feel. It's just usually how it feels to me.
100%. And the smaller you have to make each element as well. All right.
Yeah.
User GL8 says, I've been using Ascend to mix in my favorite widening effect with its mid signal taken out completely, which makes it fully mono compatible. The only problem is that the original mid signal is unaffected. That's interesting. He says, this episode's timing is perfect as I've been on a deep dive of stereo widening tools recently, specifically mono compatible methods. Ozone Imager can be recreated by duplicating the original sound, delaying it by up to 20 milliseconds, and inverting the phase of one side. There, I think he's probably talking about the stereo-wise kind of thing. It's doing something similar to, but not exactly that, I think.
Yeah, I don't think that's exact, because I think if you did that, you'd get something insane. I'm sure. I think it's a little bit more sculpted across the frequency bands than that.
Probably. I'd like to look into it more.
I have to look into the manual. It's been a minute, but so the guy, the commenter was saying that his favorite stereo effect is to just take the sides in Ascend and just do stuff to the sides.
I think he's saying he likes to send his sides only to certain stereo effects, leaving the original mid unaffected. I think that's an interesting idea, sending just the sides of things to reverbs or other effects. I haven't done a lot of that because I do mostly mastering these days, and it wouldn't have occurred to me back in my mixing days. But it's an interesting concept. Is that something you've messed around with at all? Using things to filter out mids and sending just sides to your effects?
Yeah, I've done that a lot. I've done that a lot either in the reception to or in the giving of a side chain. Like I'll have something affect the sides, but not the mids in a dynamic way. So I wish we defaulted to some indifference, because mids also means mid-range. It's so annoying. But I think also, I mean, it is mono compatible up into a fault. Like if you start using delays or modulated effects on the side channel, it is in mono. It's gonna it's gonna, like, that thing that's already in the left that isn't in the right is going to be at a different time and frequency than the thing that was in the center, and it's going to phase or rub or cancel out the center. So that's why one has to be sort of careful with that. It's not always
what
bad.
Types of effects you send to. Right. That is true. That sometimes like phasiness and stuff can be awful and can make you feel like allergic to the sound that's coming out, but it also can be like super cool and super interesting. Notably, what's it called? I think it was the big Coldplay song Yellow that Michael Brower mixed, where his assistant engineer didn't have delay compensation set up properly, and the drums were just comb filtered, and they were mixing it like that. And they're like, sounds great. And that's what they went with. Just comb filter drum sound from mismatched delay compensation.
I hope that guy's getting royalties and not fired. That's
right. Well, when you have a track as big as Coldplay's Yellow, I think you get to keep your job.
Is there a person alive who doesn't like hear? I guess young people, but like you tell me Coldplay's Yellow, I know exactly where I was when I heard that for the first time. Like I know exactly what grade of school I was in.
It's one of those. I'm sure there's. Tell us in the chat what tracks are like that for you. All right. 7Adam7 says, you talk about people widening low end with the drums, with reverb, etc. I like subtle mismatching of left and right channel volume, like what you're talking about now, or dual mono stuff. All right, cool. Yeah. So that's another great way to get stereo stuff, is just treating left and right separately. It's not what comes to people's mind as much, but something that is super easy to do and a great technique to utilize. What do you guys know about Fruity Flanges? Apparently it's a stacked flanger plugin that's unique in that it sounds like nothing else. I'm a Logic user, but FL Studio has some of the best stock VSTs ever. So I guess that is a flanger that's inside of Fruity Loops. I'm not familiar with it.
I don't have Fruity Loops, but it would be wonderful if somebody cracked the code on it and put it into, like
these things sometimes seem to happen.
Yeah.
X for Dimension Expander is a little known free mono compatible widening plugin. Are you familiar with that one?
I am. Yeah, that's a good one.
Did this one not make it in because it's something that is familiar to people already?
I don't think so. Xfer is one of those tools that's like, you know, I remember diving into Xfer like in those tools in like 2008 and just being like,
Mm-hmm.
what the heck is this? And so it's like one of those things. Also, I don't think they have an AAX. So like anything that doesn't have an AAX is also like automatically out for most people. Not for me, because I use Reaper. And
Mm-hmm.
when I do have to work in Pro Tools, I mean, you're sometimes sponsored by Avid, so I'll keep it there. Pro Tools is great. We
Mm-hmm.
love our own.
Our Pro Tools overlords. I'm a Pro Tools fan. I've been a user of it for more than 20 years, and it is, my main DAW, even though I do mastering, which is an unusual thing for people who do mastering.
It's not that unusual. I know a lot of mastering engineers who work in Avid and work in Pro Tools. And then what do you use to sequence? You use
this
Hopper
is a
or
separate
Wavelab?
conversation. I have I've been getting into Wavelab, and I might be switching over now to Wavelab. They've just come out with a new version, and Greg Ondo is actually scheduled to give me a little private lesson on Wavelab, and I'm thinking about switching to it. So we'll see. But okay, moving on to our next question was Rhodes VPan is decently comparable in some regards to PanMan. Cool. That's another option.
So is Guitar Rig, any version of Guitar Rig, or any JS plugin, any plugin that has an LFO that can modulate the sides. So you know what? Saturn.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Why not?
Okay, there you go.
Just do the distortion. Just modulate the sides with the LFOs.
Air Windows Wider is a gem,
That's
says 83 Safari. Is that similar to the wider one from Infected Mushroom that we were looking at, or is it a different concept?
No, it's straight up MS, but there's a little bit of analog sauce on the S.
Mm-hmm. All right, some quick questions here from Psych. Had a whole bunch of questions, and I think we're going to have to shut it down just about after this. One, Can you give an example of how you would approach low-end widening with Q4? For example, these modern heavy 808s. Okay, so widening, I think we ended up talking about that a little bit. With something like Q4, you would set it to mid-side mode, and then you would boost the sides.
I mean,
on the lows.
I don't
know.
Do you need it to be an 808 sample? I'm sorry. Do you need it to be Q4 that we use? Because I would almost rather go the left-right, like dual mono EQ thing for that, just because there's not a ton of decorrelated information in one of those 808s.
Right, that's a good point. Yeah, if you're using if it's a sample. Yet I honestly think that one of the ways that I've heard the stereo bass thing being done is sometimes with like separate instruments left and right is a trick that I've heard sometimes. That's really radical. But there's actually a mix that Jakir King did on MixCon where he had like two different kicks, one left and one right. And that's how he got his width. And I thought that was like, it seemed like it should be too much, but the way he did it wasn't. But I think you raise a great point, which is just turning up the sides. If it's a mono sample of an 808, that's not really going to do it. That would work more on something like a kick sample or a kick sound where we have room or overhead, where there is some difference between left and right.
Here's what I would do.
Mid-side EQ on that, yeah.
Here's what I would do, and I'll throw in FabFilter plugins because you wanted to say Q4. You take your 808, you bus it. You bus it to just an aux track. You put Pro Q C3 on there, and you have it really fast attack, really fast release. Have it duck when the original signal hits, or you could just even have it. You don't even need it to sidechain. Actually, what am I thinking? You don't even have to sidechain. You could just do it off the thing. You just want it to really. You might need to internal high pass because the highs of a thing come before the lows. So you might want to filter it so that it comes off of the sides. Right. The important thing is you want it to get out of the way of the original kick very very quickly and come back. Then Pro R2. Pro R2 reverb. Short as a reverb can be. and something lexicon-y, something and that way you're out of the way, and it has to be the right kind of mix, but you're out of the way of your initial transient, and you've got your width with just a little bit of lingering sauce. That's probably, if I needed to do it, that's probably like I'm a guy who's not afraid to put a reverb on a kick drum, and it can sound pretty good
if you do it right. And often my preference for these things is for them not to be excessively toppy reverbs, particularly on percussion in general. But there could be exceptions there. So another one here, if you have any ideas on this, B Cook Music says, can we talk about stereo versus mono bass? I find myself wanting to blend the two. What are your thoughts? Anything there?
Yeah. Sure. I mean, I don't know if he's talking about a mix or in a master.
He's probably talking about it from the arrangement and mixing perspective. Like, could you blend a stereo and mono bass sound together? And I would say that is one way that I've heard where there's like a multi-layered bass sound where maybe it could be either of these ways. One, the deeper, darker, heavier part is in the center, but it has like it's layered with a sound that's wider and buzzier. And that's one thing I've heard in some mixes. And I've also heard the exact opposite, where it's like the mid-range of the instrument is centered, but then surprisingly, like the bottom of it blooms. And sometimes these will be layered samples or layered instruments that they could be two instruments, like literally playing in unison, like a MIDI note triggering two different instruments. And one is handling the center, one's handling the sides. And there'll be some difference where either the side stuff will be brighter and buzzier than the center, or the center will be like your knock and your click and your attack, and the whoomp comes out of the sides. And I would imagine it's usually happening with either two instruments or one instrument that allows you to have two different sounds that are separate for center and sides.
I would also say if you're talking about, I think they do, multi-output instruments or whatever. Yeah. If you're talking about just a normal bass, all the time if I get a DI bass, I'll route one of those suckers through like an amp, like the SVT or an amp rig. And then the other one I'll route through Guitar Rig in a I think it's called Bass Invader in Guitar Rig, and I'll really slide that over to the cabs so it feels like the room. That's very stereo. And then I'll use bass lane to maybe cut out some of the lows if I wanted to, but that definitely makes me feel like I'm listening to a bass player at a concert, which is a sound I really like.
Yeah, that's something that should, the top secret plugin we're talking about now, you're giving me additional ideas. But yes, I 100% love the idea of taking stereo sounding amp cab with mono sounding DI. And I imagine it would be possible to do the opposite, where you could have like a really fat, direct sounding low end that's to the sides, and then a tighter bass sound in the center. I've heard that less often, but it's something that you could play around with, because I've heard that done on more synthetic types of music, and I wouldn't be surprised if you could achieve the same effect with a bass DI and amp. Yeah.
I think in those heavy examples I was showing earlier, the bass was exactly that. It was DI with a little bit of Guitar Rig on the cab. Yeah.
Sweet.
And
question here from someone, I forget exactly who was asking it, but someone was asking, where would you put these things in your mix bus chain, or I guess on individual instruments, things that are going to widen the stereo field? Where would you put them in your chain of plugins? Should they come before or after certain things, in your opinion?
I don't know, man. People really love to be real circumscribed on this, and I really feel like it depends on the thing that you're doing. Because obviously those widening console replacement bus plugins that I was showing you, you're going to have to put them on first. That's what you do. But something that's like the Frass or that might want to come after compression, honestly. Because you dial in, it's always a good idea to dial in what your dynamics are going to feel like, or if you're using the compressor for a tone or for an attitude, dial that in, and then with it. More often than not, I'm not using a stereo width plugin on the bus. I'm using a stereo. I'm getting my width from my compressor. And if that's the case, that's just where it is. It's in the compressor. It's there.
I can give some notes from a mastering perspective. By default, my imager plugin, my stereo widening plugin, whatever I'm using, is usually near the end of my chain, like after dynamics and after saturation, before the limiter is where it is by default for me. Now, that said, if I was going to do something where I really wanted to do separate mid-side processing in some kind of way, where I really wanted to either to solve a problem, I'm supposed to be subtle in mastering, and I usually am, but if I really want to solve a problem and I need the sides to separate from the center more because I need to compress or EQ the sides a little bit differently from the center, and I want to exaggerate that happening, if I know that I'm going to be doing additional widening, I would put that additional widening first. Like if I'm trying to solve a problem and I want to be able to EQ the sides more separately from the center, then if you're enhancing your width first and then doing your EQ or compression that's supposed to just target the sides or just target the center, the signals will be more separate from each other, so you can be a little bit more precise about only affecting the sides or only affecting the center, because you've separated things before you've hit your mid-side processors. So in those cases where I really want to solve a problem, or I really want to process sides separate from center as much as I can, if I'm going to be doing widening, I would do that widening before I hit my mid-side processors. However, by default, it's usually at the end of the chain, and it's just a last little bit of thing I'm doing kind of at the end, after I've gotten the most I can do from tonally, just from EQ and other things. So it's usually near the end of my chain, but sometimes like 20, 30% of the time, I move it earlier for a specific reason.
If you listen to the answer that Justin just gave you, it is yes, and take notes. Like put it in a place, practice, write down, write down what works. Yeah. And it becomes second nature over time.
For sure. You know what should also be second nature? Hitting like and subscribe and the notifications bell, and also putting your love for Nick Messitte into the chat. If I get enough chats and comments that Nick's got to come back on the channel again, then what's going to happen? Nick's going to come back on the channel again. Nick, thank you so much for spending all of your time with us and, being super late for dinner and all that stuff. And you've got to go ahead and check out Nick's article if you haven't already. Go over to sonicscoop.com. Should be the top article on the site right now. And the name of it is, oh my God, this is super long. It's like 4,000 or 5,000 words. The best stereo with plugins that you probably haven't heard of. And I heard about 10% of these. So this is no lie. And man, it was absolutely great to have you here. Any final words of wisdom you want to leave the people with?
Yeah, like I think the last thing I said is about the most, like, take an hour out of your day and practice if you can. It's so much fun. I would say I'm really interested in doing these tools that you've never heard of articles. So leave a comment if you want to see more of them, what subject you'd like to see me cover. I have a lot of fun talking because that's just how people in my family are. And
that's why we get along so much. We both talk for 2 hours, apparently. This is the New York blood. I've moved to New Hampshire, and I try to talk more slowly and less than I normally would in New York, but it is not taking, Nick. It's just...
I haven't noticed a difference, Justin. I've known you for years. I've not noticed a difference.
All right. I've got to say to the people before we go that there's one last quick thing I have to say, which is check out our great full-length courses like Mixing Breakthroughs, Mastering Demystified, Compression Breakthroughs, EQ Breakthroughs. They will change the way that you work forever, for the better, or your money back. Definitely get them. And man, also join us over at members.sonicscoop.com if you want mixed feedback on your mixes. You have something to add there?
Saved my marriage. It saved my marriage. I have to tell you, I was going to be on the street before I took these courses. And I took them. Now I'm great.
Wonderful. Stop annoying your wife, asking her to listen to your mixes and send them to me instead. Join our mixed feedback things, right? Instead of, hey, babe, what do you think of the snare drum? It sounds exactly the same as the last 37 mixes you did. No, but you don't understand. There's a half a dB of extra EQ at 1/2 K. Please leave me alone. We have a kid. I need to feed them. Get away from me. Okay.
Is my house bugged, Justin? Are you bugging my conversation?
Yeah, I never play my wife any of my work. That is exactly the answer that I would get. So, although I do occasionally will take her things, I'm not confident with, like, my thumbnails, which are all terrible. I guess some of the worst thumbnails on YouTube. I'll be like, can you take a look at this really quick? Like, what did I do wrong? And she'll tell me what I've done wrong. And then, like, I make them marginally better. I'm like, can you do it for me? She's like, no, I'm busy doing other stuff. But anyway,
I think if your mouth is closed, you're winning the battle. As long as your mouth is closed in these things, you're like,
All right. Wisdom. Okay. Last thing I will say, in addition to this, in addition to taking the full-length courses and getting into our mixed feedback session, so you don't have to play your mix to your wife or significant other, or for the 2% of females in the YouTube audience, I've seen my stats. For the 2% of you who don't want to annoy your husband with your mixes, you can also join as well. Welcome to 2% of ladies here. Please type in the chat if you're one of the 2% of ladies on this channel. Thank you for being here, and awesome to have you. In addition, Sound Toys. Check out anything that Sound Toys makes for free for 30 days over at soundtoys.com. Sponsoring this podcast from the beginning. Absolutely love their stuff. Check out their Pan Man, the Decapitator, the Echo Boy, the Devil Lock, all this awesome stuff. And thank you one more time to Mr. Nick Messitte. Thanks for hanging out.
Thank you for having me, sir, and have a nice evening. And
you too.
Happy mixing, and God bless, my friend.
Right back at you. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. It's been Justin Colletti of Sonic Scoop with Nick Messitte. See you next time.
See you.